TEDxUStreetSalon inaugural event. My name is Xavier McDuffie, also go by name of Zay. And I'll be your master MC today. Alright, so after the talk, you'll hear from my co-MC, Mr. Alton Bell over here. And but for now, let me tell you a little about me. So, I'm a recent graduate from Mount St. Mary's. I'm also a local artist, but please don't tell my mama because she's gonna try to look me up on the internet. You don't need all that. So. But enough about me, Mr. Alton.
Thank you, Zay. I'd also like to thank everybody and welcome you to this inaugural TEDxUStreetSalon event. As Zay had mentioned, my name is Alton Bell. I am a native Washingtonian, born and raised, product of DC Public Schools. Shout out to the Coolidge Coats. I am a father of two adult males, actually, also born and raised here in the DMV. So this subject today is very meaningful to me as well. As they said, we'll be the MCs for today's event, and we'll be the moderators for the discussion panels as well. So just to give you a little bit going here, today we are gathering a group of leaders to discuss the topic, the future of men of color. And we hope by the end of the day, our goal is to provide you the 3 E's: educate, enlighten, and entertain. Before we begin though, I must mention some of the official TED announcements. The TEDxUStreetSalon is an independently organized event licensed by TED. We will feature local voices, TED Talks, and an intergenerational panel discussion around the theme, the future of men of color. But before we go to that, a little bit of history about the TED. In 2009, TED launched the TEDx program of locally organized events that brings community together to share a TED-like experience. Some of the best TED Talks or TEDx Talks have gone on to be featured on TED.com and have been viewed by millions of people around the globe. So, when referring to this event, please make sure you say this is a TEDx event rather than a TED event, so that this is clear. All right, thank you very much. And again, I'm glad we're here, and we can move on with the other technical things of the day. So today you will be inspired by speakers, panelists, myself, and Zay. More so the speakers and the panelists. As one of the MCs of our event today, our job is to direct you through this program as we guide you through this evening's event. At the registration desk, when you signed in, you were told that this event is going to be recorded. So if you're part of the Federal Witness Protection Program or something like that, you might want to bow your head and keep your head down just in case the camera zoom in so you aren't discovered and have to leave the country. Let's all be respectful of everyone's opinion. We all have one. So we have to be respectful and understand to either agree or disagree. And if you disagree, just say, I agree to disagree. Or if you need further clarification, just ask and for more clarification, knowing that further clarification may or may not affect your judgment and change your mind. As a reminder, we are recording this, so please, when you come out to ask questions or be out in the audience, please watch your language. Rule number 4, very important, no heckling. The speakers today have worked very hard on their speeches, and they deserve to be heard. Now, the next rule, rule number 5, this is very important. Again, we are recording the speaker's talk for the YouTube station. Therefore, we don't want your phone ringers to be going off. So at this point, let's check our phones, make sure our phones are off or on silent, so we don't have your ringtones interrupting the events today. Rule number 7, we ask for branding purposes, when you come up to the microphone to ask questions, we ask that you wear your mask so you can be seen wearing the TEDx brand. And finally, and maybe more importantly, no recording or taking photographs with flashes. It is a TED requirement not to record the event because of copyright laws, as well as taking pictures with flashes. That's just going to disrupt the recording sessions. So we thank you in advance for your cooperation. And okay, let's move on with the program. In summary, our event today will feature 4 sessions. Session 1 is titled Navigating Within a System That Don't Appreciate Your Heritage. That will be followed by session 2, Is Wealth the Answer to the Future of Men of Color? Session 3 is a very interesting session. It'll be featuring the healing of men of color, discussing the events of the young people and how they heal today. And then finally, session 4 will be an intergenerational discussion about the future, which is directed by our friend, up-and-coming leader and director, June Mugo. You will also be able to ask questions and follow-up questions during the discussions. And remember, you must wait until you're called before you come up to the mic, or before you actually begin to talk when you come up to the mic. I know it's kind of like high school or junior high, but that's how we got to do it, just say organized. So, anyway, prior to each session, myself or Zay will introduce the sessions and the speakers. So, that said, I'm going to hand it back over to Zay so we can get the program started.
All right, thank you, Alton. So our first session today is navigating within a system that doesn't appreciate your heritage. We will open up with an official TED video, then go into a performance by Ashley White. Next, a TED speaker, Clint Smith. Then move right to our TEDx speaker, Arthur Coulter. His talk titled The Fierce Urgency of Now, The Man's Finding Your Inner Agitator. Arthur's bio is in your program. And as we mentioned, after the talk, we have a discussion / Q&A. And the discussion will be moderated by myself, Mr. Alton. And after the discussion, we'll take a 5-minute break and then to the next session. So let's get it on the road.
Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
My name is Ashley White. I'm creative out of Woodbridge, Virginia. Super blessed to be here. access our power, to really just dig into all that we are and use it in our everyday life, using our walk and our talk. Let's talk about it. I am an absolute, and I got passion too. My words are well designed, crafted, kindly, right, magical. My mind is a tool I use, my heart is a tool to use. I live in a time machine. See, every day is new, every day is news. Every day we grew, and every time we pray, there's a mountain moved, there's a chain break, there's a breath of life. Breath of life, blah blah. Can't take no more of that rah rah. I know some people that got eyes, healing the demons say bye. Letting their faces like ha ha. We call it victory. We ain't attached to no misery. Breaking the chains of our history. Yeah, they hate to be conscious. They hate that we know that we're free. They hate we don't follow their rules. They can't stand to be taking a knee. They hate that our fists in the air. They put straps in their pocket. It's strengthen the numbers they scared. That's why they cock it, pop it, blah. Hey, blah. See, I was told at a very young age that there's some things I'm gonna have to watch out for as a black body. And my family taught me very well that what you surround yourself with is a reflection of who you are. So I'm learning now to reflect a little differently on who I'm with as a black body, who I choose to represent me. Hopefully this next part helps us learn a little bit about victory. Alright? They messed around planting us right where flowers bloom. Some say it's destined that you become what's surrounding you. And we conditioned to think we only were well for storm. And we've been royalty ever since the day we were born. Cause it's changed, now I walk different. They gon' ask me in the rain why I talk different. I found victory in lines, now my walk different. Seasons changed, I forgave, now my heart different. Yeah. The biggest thing about this is healing. Is learning ourselves, learning that all we have is all we need. Learning how to access all that power and use it and push it out to people that look like us, people that want to understand us, people that don't understand us and need to understand us. It's a beautiful thing to be black, and it comes with a lot of adversity. It comes with a lot of trial and error, but it's a great time to learn yourself, and it's a great time to take a look through your time machine and figure out what to do with what you have and how to make it effective in the world we live in today. Super grateful for being here. Thank you again. My name's Ashley White. Check me out everywhere. Thank you.
Right after the death of George Floyd, I tried to process it all. The moment that still haunts me is watching that video of the officer as he put his knee in George Floyd's neck. As he said, "I can't breathe." As he begged for mercy and cried out for what we now know was his already deceased mother. That week, as I thought about the other young men of color and all the other men of color that have been subjected to vigilante justice, police brutality, it began to become just a little bit too overwhelming. And I was searching for some type of outlet, and social media was one of them for me. One particular post that I posted was this cartoon. This cartoon was this officer. He was a white, stout officer, and he was talking to a young African-American boy about 6 or 7 years old. And he says to this young boy, he says, "So, young man, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And the young boy says, "Alive." This cartoon spoke to me as an African American parent because I think it spoke more to a fear. I think that many African American and parents of color had. There's a study by Rutgers University that says black men are 2.5 more likely than white men to be killed by the police in their lifetime. Another study by the American Society of Criminology says black people who are fatally shot are twice as likely than whites to be unarmed. In a subsequent post, I talked about my son, who was 6 at the time when I was talking about this post, and we were going to the store, and as we were getting out, my son got really excited. And he's like, "Hey, Mr. Policeman, hey, Mr. Policeman." And as we get out, and the police officer greeted us and said, "Hey, young man, how you doing?" What should have been a very just innocent exchange, I couldn't help but be saddened, because what I realized at that moment is that I would eventually have to, this one exchange would eventually be tainted, because I would have to have a conversation with my son about this relationship with law enforcement. Well, that little 6-year-old is now a 12-year-old football and lacrosse player and can be easily mistaken for a teenager. And he's just as tall as I am now. What that means is we had to have the talk a lot sooner than I might have wanted to. What that also meant is, yes, I did have to taint that once innocent relationship that my son had with law enforcement. And just in case you're wondering, what is the talk? It's when parents of color have the unenviable task to tell our kids that a special set of rules exists for them as it relates to law enforcement. And just to be clear, this isn't some esoteric conversation of whether law enforcement is good or bad, because we have law enforcement in my family that we're extremely proud of. But this conversation, this talk, is about survival. So we're talking about the future of men of color and how we're standing here today. As I stand only a few steps away from the Lincoln Memorial, I can't help but think of the March on Washington, which was a little more than 50 years ago. Now, when some people think of the March on Washington, they think of Dr. Martin Luther King and the "I Have a Dream" speech. Now, I'd be remiss if I did not associate my connection with Dr. King, being a Morehouse alum, a Georgia native, as well as a fraternity brother. But as we think about the "I Have a Dream" speech, most people like to go to the end of that speech because it feels good. Free at last, thank God Almighty, we're free at last. But you see, some of the most pertinent words of that speech was actually at the beginning. You see, there Dr. King talked about a different type of free. You see, there he said after over 100 years, the Negro was still not free. You see, there Dr. King came to this nation capital actually talking about cashing a check. And he relied on the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, where he said the framers had actually signed a promissory note. And that promissory note guaranteed all of us, yes, black men as well as white men, the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That was the phrase that fueled the impetus phrase that we now hear a lot of time in speeches, the fierce urgency of now. He went on to say that tomorrow is today, and there is a such thing as being too late. So that's why you have to move with vigor and not be complacent. So now as we talk about the fierce urgency of now, as it relates to the men of color. We have to know that we have to recognize that we can't settle for status quo. When we say "we the people" in the preamble, we can no longer let it be duplicitous words that only represent some of the people. You see, on January 6, 2021, our democracy was tested because there was a certain sector of people that decided that it only belonged to some people. So one of our civil rights leaders, John Lewis, said that when you see something that is not right, that is not just, that is not fair, you must speak up. It's these words that propelled John Lewis to accept his role as an agitator when he led a 600-person march in Selma, Alabama on Bloody Sunday. Now, a lot of people like to think of Bloody Sunday only about voting rights, but it also was about police brutality because they was marching for Jimmy Lee Jackson, a 26-year-old deacon who had been murdered by a state trooper in Alabama. Now, let's pause, because it is impossible for me to speak about the future of men of color and not recognize the role that police brutality plays in the future of men of color and turn a blind eye to it. We see the through line that police brutality has played, even all the way from Bloody Sunday to now to the likes of Tamir Rice, George Floyd, and all the other names that we will never know. But this is not about demonizing law enforcement, but it's combating the killing of our men of color by law enforcement. Now, I'm here today to say that as we talk about the future of men of color, it's linked to something. It's linked to all of us here looking inside of ourselves and unleashing something called the inner agitator. Now, agitator is defined as stirring up something in others that upsets the status quo. Right now is a time that all of us has to find a way to activate something in us, that we must move something in this world, in our communities. See, Dr. King, he was a great orator amongst anything, among all other things. But one thing he was is a great agitator. It was this that he was able to move all races and classes to create the civil rights movement. Now, I'm a former chief operating officer as well as an HR consultant. So I've done a lot of recruiting. So right now I feel like it's my job to recruit agitators. And in this space, we can always define this when we find our inner agitator. For me, I feel like I came into my inner agitator back in 10th grade in Georgia in my world history class. At that moment, I was wondering, and I made a simple inquiry to in my predominantly Caucasian school, in my predominantly Caucasian class, as why we were celebrating Black History Month. My teacher informed me that you don't celebrate Black history in world history. You do that in U.S. history. I thought that was an unacceptable answer. And as I told her, being Blacks, as we were all part of the world, we still should be celebrated in world history class. My teacher didn't feel that answer was acceptable as well, and she told me I could be dismissed from class and was escorted to my white principal's office. Eventually, my parents, who also was agitators, and with other African-American parents and other African-American students, we also realized we would stir things up, and eventually Black history was taught in that world history class that semester. That was a win. But what you realize is you're not always going to have wins. I have to let you know, as an agitator. You know how in the movies, when someone says they get ready to do one of these impassioned speeches, and they stand up, and everyone is spellbound, and then you hear the orchestral music, and after they finish, you hear that one person clap, and then the other person clap, and then you hear the thunderous applause, and it just sounds great. Well, I made one of those impassioned speeches because at my job, I felt like someone had to shake things up. Well, I'm here to let you know. There was no music. There were no claps. And eventually, there was no job. But, you know, once I got over the shock, it was okay. Because what I realized was that I believed so much in what I was doing that I knew if I had to do it all over again, I would. And that's my point today. That sometimes the moment dictates the response and the behavior. Now, I used to believe that everybody couldn't be an agitator, it just wasn't your role. But I don't believe that now. I'm a believer that now there are moments, causes, and events that what I like to call, it makes the tension, it agitates. It's that needed tension. Throughout our lifetimes, whether it was the civil rights movement, right up until now, most recently, the Black Lives Matter movement, is that stillness doesn't work. That you need tension, and that it needs everyone. It needs everyone moving, movement, agitation. And right now, I'm saying that as we talk about what we're doing for the focus of men of color, we need everyone. So some people ask me, what should I do? How should I do it? I can't define it for you. But what I am saying is no one gets to sit on the sidelines anymore. Everyone has to do something. So when you ask me, what is the future of men of color? For me, it's finally cashing that check that Dr. King talked about 50 years ago. The future of men of color for me is what the Aspen Institute talked about, is achieving racial equity, where we hold American society to a higher standard. We don't just focus on individual level discrimination, but we focus on higher social outcomes. So now, as you begin on your journey to finding your inner agitator, you may be a beginner. So I'm going to give you a few tips as you move forward. One, continue to call out racism. Have a plan. Most people say that the reason they had problems calling out racism is they either felt uncomfortable when they saw the behavior. So have a plan. Two, know that whenever you have your social media platforms, use them. Those are crucial to whenever you find, whether it's social justice, whether it's police brutality, those are key to spreading your message abroad. Three, know that silence is complicity. Recently, there was a George Floyd put your knee on your neck challenge. Things like that, you have to know that you got to speak out on that. Just deleting it is not enough. Whether it's jokes, memes, whatever someone is doing, you have to speak up. And whenever you see injustice being done to people of color, are you looking the other way? Or are you using your agency and power to make a difference for people of color? And finally, seek allyship in untraditional spaces. Now, I gave you an example about that world history teacher in my 10th grade class. After graduation, we would come back together and have some really poignant conversations. And eventually, we actually would become friends. This was key because my mother, who's an educator, they would come together and have some multicultural programming for my county that was able to help many other students. So you never know what those relationships can do. In conclusion, I will still end with a quote from Dr. King. He says that destinies of blacks and whites are inextricably bound. Without a just world for blacks, there can be no just world for whites. So it is my hope that as we strive for that just world that is linked not only for the men of color's future, but for America's future, that you're inspired and even compelled for that fierce urgency of now to find your inner agitator. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. That was a very provocative message, very deep, very thoughtful. Let's give Arthur another round of applause, please. Well done, sir. Well done. At this time, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, for which we wouldn't have this event otherwise. So I want to thank the Journey to Your Promised Land, Inc., for being our nonprofit fiscal agent for today's event. Proceeds from today's event will benefit programs that empower youth in this area. We also would like to thank our community sponsor, the Mary Church Terrell Foundation, whose mission is to provide educational resources and scholarships to youth in Washington, D.C. Thanks again for our sponsors, for without them, we would not be able to effectively execute this event. All right, folks, at this time, we're going to take a moment and have a discussion with Mr. Arthur Cutler about his talk. If you have any questions, now's the time to line up at the microphone so you can ask your questions regarding Arthur's speech. I'll get the discussion kicked off. Again, Arthur, you made a very impassioned speech there, and there were 4 things that you provided to us that was important. The one, to continue to call out racism when you see it. The second was to be an agitator. The third was to know that silence is complicity. And the fourth was to seek allyship, even in non-traditional partners. And with respect to calling out racism, my question for you is there a right or wrong way to do this? You mentioned having a plan. Can you be too aggressive or not aggressive enough? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think what I've learned is over the years, there's been a young Arthur and an older Arthur. What I do say is that I think you have to do it in your space. What I have learned, I think, with the Black Lives Matter movement is talking something too, is that generationally everybody has to do it their way. But what I have learned is even with what I call is timing is everything. And when you have your plan, you have to know that the timing is the right space. Because even with movement, you realize that, if it's not the right time, that movement can be detrimental. So I think formulating that plan, and you have to know the person. So that's always important. So what I've learned is, formulating that plan, knowing who they are, but still doesn't mean you don't act. I think a lot of people use that as an excuse not to act. So you still have to act, it's just timing and strategy. So 2 words is timing and strategy with that plan.
Awesome, thank you very much. On your second point regarding being an inner agitator and using social media, you pointed out how you being an agitator basically cost you your job. So, from what I got from that. But at the same time, it's very impactful. And today, with the power of social media, we can all have a voice, right? So, spreading a message and support those issues and pointing out injustice and police brutality to reach a larger audience using social media is important for that. Can you take us a little deeper into what you feel is the best way to use that resource and getting that message across via social media? Because social media does reach not just the community, but it reaches across the globe.
Yeah, I think social media is so powerful. When you use, like I said, I think everybody's learned it can use the good way and use definitely the wrong way. A lot of time I think from somebody that's learning to be an agitator, the first thing I've heard is, well, I'm not on social media, and that's not something I do a whole lot. And what I tell people is, you're probably the best person, because then when you speak, people will listen more. And so I think now is use social media, but use it sparingly. But it doesn't mean that, because your friends and family, they listen to you. And so one of the, we talk about the police brutality and things of that nature. That's something I think now social media, it has a powerful voice in reach. We never know how who we reach and how we reach people is the way I think social media can use and be used. And when you're trying to get the cause out there, so to me, that to have that type of reach is almost unparalleled.
Agreed. Another thing that you pointed out, which was impactful for me, is when you said silence is complicity. And you know, when I first heard that kind of thing over the summer, what I saw was basically people referring to other non-minority people and calling them out and being silent and saying, "Hey, you have to speak up." Your message seems to say, "Hey, us as a minority, we need to not be silent, and we need to point things out more appropriately, more aggressively, more often."
Yeah, yes, it's for, and then like this message is for everyone. But you know, one example I can give you is I was in a corporate environment, and one time I had a young intern that was in my space, and I spoke up for him when I saw no one else speaking up for him, and he told me thank you. And all I told him, I said, here's what I'll tell you. One day, as an African-American intern, I said, you're going to be in a room where it's going to be you and someone else. I need you to pay that forward because it's going to be someone else like you. And because I've been in spaces where it was people of color and they didn't help out, they didn't speak up. And so it's not always just black and white, but at the same time, it's all colors. And so what I'm saying is everyone. When you are in a room, much like sometimes I'm in a room where it's not always about that, where I'm the only male in the room. I speak up sometimes for the voice of, you know, I have 3 sisters. I speak up for female, you know, so it's not, you know, when you have a voice for those that are not, when you're speaking, you're that person of higher, you know, you have a higher weight or you're higher gender. You need to speak up, and that's really what I'm talking about. Silence is complicity. If you have that power, you have agency. You need to speak up.
Very good, very good. The last point you made there was very important as well. You said, seek allyship even in non-traditional partners. I find this to be a pretty important message because it suggests that we look outside of our community, outside of the inner circle, outside of the people that look like us, because we have to expand our reach and work towards a common goal with people that are outside of our race. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times we have I think all groups, we have a tendency to, coalesce into our own silos. And especially I use that example because a lot of times when we have differences and things happen, we definitely tend to break off. And it took a lot for that example because I can't even get into example for that year. What happened during that year was a lot of hurt that happened there. So coming back, even when there's been some hurt, and the thing about it is us coming together with that, me and that teacher, it helped so many other people, other young African Americans, so many other later down, and also other people non-color. So finding a way to partner in non-traditional spaces, you never know the dividends that pay years down the road.
Outstanding, outstanding.
I was just reading through the pamphlet, and it mentioned that you had a little international experience. And I wanted to see how has that influenced your perspective as a social justice warrior or agitator? Has that given you a different perspective on how you agitate, or a different perspective of, yeah.
Okay, so your first part of your question, I'm sorry, you said.
So basically, I read in the pamphlet that you had some, later on you had some international experience.
Oh, okay.
And I'm saying, what type of perspective did that provide you as an agitator?
Okay, yeah, very interesting. I think it gives you, because you see from a different perspective because of, and a lot of it was in Northern Africa, so you see it from, in a space of, you realize the luxury we have here to be able to have that agitation experience. But I will say this, the young people in Northern Africa, they have the vigor at which they have taken that space, and because of Arab Springs, and I was really impressed because they don't have the fear at which it's like all out. Right. And so you talk about the Black Lives Matter movement. Mm-hmm. It was almost they hit it first. If you could have been over there, like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, okay, they were there. I mean, and the vigor which they move. So I think it inspired me. So I will give you that. Like it gave me a different look and a different feel of how we needed to kind of push. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Because I think our generation, I would say this one, my generation, I think I was slightly, because I'm Generation X, and we were told to just kind of hold back a little bit.
So, and the reason I say that is because for a while, I'm originally from Indiana. Okay. However, I've been here for 15 years, and I moved a certain way, and I constantly finessed here, but it only got me a certain distance. Yeah. And unfortunately, because how you interact with power or how you interact with politics, you have no perspective of it. And people being in the nation's capital and having an awareness of it, they look at you in a different way. And I remember I was in Kentucky, and it was a gentleman from DC, and how he perceived things was totally, I think it was around the Michael Brown case. And I lived here in DC though, but I was able to see his perspective and how he engaged people from the Midwest. And I had then gained some perspective, but I was kind of like stuck, like you said, like knowing how to engage, and if I'm going to engage, how to identify allies to be effective in doing anything actually. So I appreciate it.
I'm happy to talk further conversation.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know that was a long-winded.
We have one more question here. Then we have to take our break.
All right, so I do have a question. I guess for the younger generation, what do you recommend for us to be like agitated? How do you recommend for us to do that?
So one of the things I would say about the younger generation, I think you guys actually are innately, you grew up in a space where I would say more of an agitator spirit, if that makes sense a little bit, because your generation seems to already want, and I said the Black Lives Matter movement, the interesting piece about that, you have some of my generation that are slightly resistant, but you guys have. Now, the thing I would say about the younger generation is I talked about that strategy and timing. If I had anything to leave that this generation would, it's just learning that piece, because sometimes it's all out. And so sometimes that's the number 4. If I would say this generation I would work with is the ally and partnership, because sometimes it becomes I'm going all out, and who do I partner with, and strategy and timing. Because it doesn't mean we're trying to stop. Because I work with a lot of, I've been trying to do a lot. So it's trying to like take that energy and how do we do it so it's strategy and the timing. But I think this generation is almost innately agitated. They're born to like, let's do it. But I like to say it's that movement, because you move the wrong way at the wrong time, you can still get some interest results, and it may be detrimental at times.
All right. Thank you. All right, thank you, folks. We're going to continue with the program, but before we go further, it's my responsibility here to remind everyone of the house rules. Even though you guys are doing great, I have to remind you to 1, be respectful. 2, no heckling. So we're doing great so far with that. 3, reminder to make sure your phones are off and your ringers are silent. 4, we will, again, after the end of the talk, we'll have another discussion. So we will ask the audience, if you have questions, to come to the mic Do us a favor, again, for branding purposes and for COVID purposes, leave your mask in place when you come to the mic, and just make sure you get up to the mic and speak clearly. And last but not least, no recording, no taking pictures with the flash, right? So just so we can stay above the law, or level with the law at least, and make sure that TED doesn't come after us. All right, with that said, I'm going to hand over the mic to Xavier here, and he's going to introduce the next segment.
All right, let's get it. So our next session is entitled "The Wealth, the Answer to the Future of Men of Color." We'll start with a performance by Jerry Holmes. Our second TEDx speaker, Andre Rogers, will present his TED Talk titled "A Different Kind of Persistence, Exceptional Persistence." All right, so Andre bio is in the programs, and we will then listen to Derek Hamilton and end with a discussion and a break, just like last time. So, ain't nothing to be too worried about. But I guess it's time to introduce Jerry Holmes. Jerry.
I'm used to it, you know what I'm saying? I was hoping, my head is you already know that's what I came to do. A lot of thoughts on my mind still. The problem is finding which ones is mine. I took a long look inside, found that I'm harder to find. So many truths inside of me, like it's a part of my spine. So many hours spent in school, found out they taught me just lies. You would think how to live right would be a part of that time. Or maybe how to be the vice and get your money to rise. They'd rather have you punching clocks instead of sharpen my mind. Cause if you go against the grain, they get to sharpen the knives. They did it once, did it twice, did it plenty of times. Then crossed them times out the history lines. They say change the channel and hit the recline. Relax, while we just pivot your mind. All these distractions and these advertisements, sexy girls tantalizing, trying to get my man inside her, trying to get my man deposits. All these only fans just fanning out and only want your pockets, just like the government and Santa stockings. A lot of thoughts on my mind still. The problem is finding which ones is mine. I took a long look inside, found that I'm harder to find. So many truths inside of me, like it's a part of my spine. So many hours spent in school, found out they taught me just lies. You would think how to live right would be a part of that time. Or maybe how to be the vice to get your money to rise. They'd rather have me punching clocks instead of sharpening my mind. Cause if you go against the grain and get to sharpen the knives. We did it once, did it twice, did it plenty of times. And cross from times out the history lines. They say change the channel and hit the recline. Relax, while we just pivot your mind. Turn up a little bit. Yeah. This part I go was stupid a little bit. It was a little bit stupid. Yeah. I ain't even that stupid right now. I'm gonna chill a little bit. Jerry Springer, E is the 3, Homes like public housing. You know, you can search me up, you're gonna find me, baby. Most definitely, I would assume and know through my journey in being myself and learning the person that I am, that money does make a lot of things easier in life, for sure. But, you know, you can have all the money in the world, but if you ain't good in your mind and you ain't good within yourself and you ain't here in this moment of time, in the present, that this second right now, then you're not where you need to be at. You most definitely are where you're supposed to be when you're here in the moment. I learned throughout my life that a lot of times, a lot of ideas and beliefs and understandings about myself and the world that we live in is kind of pushed on all of us from birth, from our parents, from schooling to religions, from many things, and capitalism. Every day I step out of my house, I'm being sold something, some advertisement, some idea about who I should be, some idea about how I should look, what clothes I should wear, how I should spend my time, and what I define as success for me. I believe we're all rich. Rich is a mindset, rich is a moment, rich is abundance, and wealth is already happening for all of us, and we just got to catch up to that moment. And I just want everybody to have a great time for the rest of the event, have a great night, and just most importantly, if you don't remember anything I said, just always make sure you're present and being here in the moment so you can decipher all these crazy little advertisements and distractions coming your way every day from other people. And just be yourself, and I'm out, man, so yeah.
I am an entrepreneur. When I think over my journey, the word that comes to my mind is persistence. Whether through the Iraq War, the Great Recession, the personal challenges in health and finance, and even after making many awards and recognitions, I still continue to persist to help our firm grow. And I wondered, where did this persistence come from? Was it something that I was born with? Or was it something that I chose to do? Or maybe I was just imitating my father. See, my father loves landscaping. He landscaped for the state of New York as his full-time job, and then he'd come home to landscape our yard. Eventually, he started landscaping other people's yard, and of course, he'd take me along. And while I really appreciated my father's willingness to cut other people's yards day after day, month after month, year after year, I didn't like that he was taking me along for free labor. I wanted to tell him that slavery had ended over 100 years ago. My father did not raise a fool, so I kept quiet. And now that my father's retired, he still continues to landscape. And I wondered, where does his persistence come from? I'm reminded of the answer given in the movie Matrix Revolutions when Agent Smith asked Neo, "Why do you persist?" Neo responds, "Because I choose to." About 20 years ago, me and two of my friends started a software company. It was our desire, our goal to earn enough money to retire in 10 years. We were going to do this by creating a software package that listed all African-American businesses. Well, back then, you had to create software packages and sell them through stores. We were working full-time, and we knew nothing about selling store products, but we persisted at night and on weekends to develop the software package and to figure out how to sell store products. One day, we were selling this package at an expo. Next to us was this young man with tire shine. About halfway through the day, he had sold so much tire dressing that his pockets was just bulging with cash. We had not sold one software package. I looked at those dismal results and concluded that this selling the software package was not the answer. Upon reflection, I realized that the persistence I used to create the software package was not enough to ensure that that software package was a success. When I compared my example of persistence and my father's example of persistence, I realized that there must be different types of persistence. The first type of persistence I call prevalent persistence. It's the type of persistence that most of us have had the opportunity to display, like persisting through school. The other type of persistence I call exceptional persistence. It's the continued pursuit of a course of action in spite of good or bad results, and doing so even if you don't have to. So I began to look for examples of this exceptional persistence. The first thing I discovered was the lack of results, the lack of immediate results did not impact exceptional persistence. Tyler Perry had several failed plays when living out of his car before he had his first success. LeBron James, his rookie year, went 35 and 47 and did not make the playoffs. And it took him 12 years before he was able to win a title for his hometown team. President Barack Obama lost his first election to Congressman Bobby Rush, 61% to 29%. President Obama remarked that he got his rear end handed to him. In fact, in some instances, the lack of any results does not impact exceptional persistence. Consider the words of Martin Luther King on the eve of his assassination, saying that I've been to the mountaintop. I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. King was persisting in something, the results he knew he would never see. I also saw that achievement did not impact exceptional persistence. LeBron James has won championships for 3 different NBA teams, yet he still persists after another one. Tyler Perry owns his own studio, yet he still persists in directing, producing, and acting. My father was retired, yet he still persists in landscaping, something he was just born to do. I also noticed that money did not impact exceptional persistence. LeBron James has earned hundreds of millions of dollars, and Tyler Perry is a billionaire, yet both of them still persist. My father's retired, not making any money, still persisting in landscaping, something that he chose to do. And it's me. See, when I think back over my journey with persistence, I realized that I was not here to persist in creating a software package. I'm here to persist in entrepreneurship. I've been an entrepreneur since I had my first paper route. Back in those days, you had to convince people to sign up for newspaper subscriptions. Then in college, I started a business where I would type other people's papers. And then I became an independent contractor before helping to start a software firm. And while I've been blessed to help that software firm earn over $20 million in annual sales, I still continue to persist in entrepreneurship until I can. And I believe that it takes this type of exceptional persistence to shape the future of men of color. To paraphrase President Calvin Coolidge, it's not talent, not education, not genius can take the place of persistence. Persistence alone is omnipotent. And I've seen how exceptional persistence has changed the course of American history, especially in the area of social justice for the better. Consider the Montgomery bus boycott. After 381 days of exceptional persistence of black people walking to work instead of taking the bus, laws were changed to allow black people to sit anywhere on the bus. After 20 years of exceptional persistence in the area of civil rights from people like Martin Luther King Jr. and John Lewis, meaningful civil rights legislation was passed in the form of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the Fair Housing Act of 1968. Haram Rhodes Revels was one of the first African Americans elected to Congress in 1870. And after 138 years of exceptional persistence from people like Frederick Douglass and Jesse Jackson, Douglas Wilder and Edward Burke, Americans elected their first African American president, President Barack Obama. And my personal example, my father, who after decades of exceptional persistence was able to retire with my mother financially secure. Choose to persist in whatever you were born to do, no matter how great or small it may seem to you. Use it to shape the future, and you will be amazed at the impact you will make with your exceptional persistence. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Andre. Thank you, Mr. Andre, for giving us a very intellectual conversation about wealth, honestly, and entrepreneurship, because it's not easy being an entrepreneur. It's not easy being black. Same thing pretty much. So I just want to say thank you. And I also want to point out the different types of persistence. I guess I really never look at it that way. So it's like it's cool to see like a different view on it. And it's not just about being the guy that's always pushing it, you know. It's levels to it. So all right, so the first question I have is wealth the answer to the future of men of color?
Is wealth the answer to
the future of men of color?
So the way I look at it is wealth can be part of the answer. You know, all things being equal, you want more money than not having money. But the fact is, all things are not equal. We come to the table with different gifts and talents. We have different challenges. And we all know people who has money and are not happy. We all know people who doesn't seem like they have any money and feel like they're on top of the world. So I really want people to, what I consider, sort of persist in their passion and purpose. Meaning whatever you feel that's kind of in your gut, that you really want to do, even if you're doing it part-time, you're starting off volunteering, persist in that, and you will land in a place that you can't imagine. Sometimes that's wealth, sometimes that's fame, sometimes that's just encouraging the next generation to do it bigger and better. The people that I've kind of mentioned, you know, such as Martin Luther King, John Lewis, there's certainly others, they didn't die wealthy, but certainly they made an impact that was second to none.
Okay, cool. All right. Okay. All right. So the second question is there equality when it comes to wealth? and reflecting on the question that Chris Anderson asked Derek, it seemed that Chris didn't really understand that wealth from a man of color is different. It's different for us, you know. So, yeah. I guess the question is there equity when it comes to wealth?
Like you mentioned before, there's definitely different levels. And just having money is not sort of what I would consider wealthy. A lot of people would say having access is much more important. So is it important that, you know, I have $1 million or that I can get $1 million when I need it? And one of the things that African Americans don't have often is access to wealth, access to capital. We typically don't come from a legacy where our parents, you know, have access to people who have wealth, and we can just say, hey, you know what, I went to boarding school with my friend, and his father owns this, and I can just ask him to, you know, give me $1 million to start my business. We don't have, so even if we were born with a trust fund, and if we have money, we have the structure to know how to leverage it, to know how to use it. Or will we just spend it and in 10 years it's gone? We know a lot of pro athletes, after they stop playing, they are poor. We know a lot of people who hit the lottery end up poor within 5 years. They're bankrupt within 5 years. So just having a lot of money isn't the answer within itself. There's a lot of things that go around it to make sure that you not only have enough for yourself, for your family, for your community, and for your legacy.
I understand. So number 3, why is it that there are so many short-term entrepreneurs and not enough long-term entrepreneurs among Black people?
Yeah, well, the real issue of entrepreneurship is hard. It is not easy. And to say that you started out as an entrepreneur and you failed, that's just part of the goal. You know, I talked a little bit about my failures. You know, Tyler Perry had his failures. Entrepreneurship is just hard. That's why for me it's very important that whatever you go into, especially if you're going into it as an entrepreneur, because it takes so much out of you, that it is something that you really feel a passion for. It's one of those things that you don't go into it for the money. You go into it saying that, hey, I'm going to do this anyway. So if I'm going to do it anyway, I might as well do it in a fashion that's going to provide me the most internal wealth, the most fulfillment. And if I happen to do well and make a lot of money, great. But if I don't, that's great as well, because I'm doing something that I love. The worst thing, no matter how much money you're making, is to wake up and do something that you hate. And that's not a fulfilled life, and I say that's not a wealthy life. But if you're doing something that you love, whether that's, you know, coaching, teaching, being an agitator, you know, community organizer, and you love it, you're living a wealthy life. You're living a fulfilled life.
So basically, you're saying it's better to be, I guess, happy. I guess, you know, it's better to be happy with what you have.
Yeah, I think if you follow if you find your passion, your purpose, and you follow it, you're gonna be a much better life. And it doesn't, you know, we have these storybooks. One that keeps ringing in my mind is Albert Einstein. He worked at a patent and trade office. That was his day job. He did mathematics on the side. He just loved it, but he just kept at it. Just kept at it. And then he did something, got insight that's now changed the world. And that's really what I mean about kind of just finding your passion and persisting at it with purpose, such that you will really be amazed when you end up with. It may take a while. It may take 20, 30, 40 years, but you'll end up in a much better place. And the community will be in a much better place because of it.
All right, so number 4, in your career, you have been able to acquire the needed funding to scale your dream. So what advice do you give others who want to do the same thing?
Well, the fact is, my experience from a financing standpoint has been much more of a bootstrap, is what they would call it. You know, you use your own funds, you find signs, sometimes you rob Peter to pay Paul, sometimes you rob Peter and you rob Paul to try to make it work. And you know, to the talk that was previous, that's not the way other people have to do it, and that's not the way it should be. You should have to do it. Access to capital is very difficult, and it's real. And you know, it is the exception, unfortunately, to be able to be successful because of the lack of capital. Some say there's about 93% of people who said their businesses, black businesses, don't have employees. So we're really talking about a small number of businesses that can't scale, can't get the capital that they need, and that's something that we really need to address. Absolutely.
All right, so if the audience has any questions, you are free to. Oh,
yeah.
Mr. Alton.
Thank you. So Andre, you spoke of exceptional persistence. I have two questions. One, does exceptional persistence ever take a day off? I mean, is there a time when you get up in the morning and go, I don't feel persistent today, I'm going to table that for another day? And then the second question is, when does exceptional persistence become an exceptional nuisance? How do you determine that you're really going down the wrong road and you're roading people the wrong way?
Yeah, so the first question is more difficult than it sounds. I mean, we all want a healthy life, and I'm older now, and we all want to say, yes, you need to take some time off and decompress, and that's the right answer. But the truth is, exceptional persistence takes less days off than you would like. Even if you're not working in it, you're thinking about it, and you're trying to set up, okay, well, I got this day off, so I have to double down the next day. And it's something that you just, when you're working in that purpose, it's just something that you just can't help. You can't help but think about it day and night. And if you ever find yourself with a downtime that's too long, you begin to think of, well, wait a minute, something must be wrong. You know, I need to be doing something. And that's good. That's something that means you're kind of working in the groove. You know, it's very difficult to figure out when you're doing something whether it's right or wrong, and you never really figure it out sometimes. Sometimes it's, you know, you get bad results, and then you still continue, you still come after. And what I have found is that you take all the information in, you look at the facts, never be afraid of facts, and then you go with your gut. You just go and do the best you can, and you know, sometimes failures that look like failures for today may be triumphs for tomorrow. You just don't know. The older you get, you realize how much you really don't know. But just go with your gut. Just trust your gut.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay. Before we start the next session, session 3, we do got some house rules we have to go over again. So be respectful. I mean, everybody's been pretty quiet. I don't really like that. It's all good. No heckling. Same thing. I mean, Gordy got the hand, so if you want to heckle, I mean, all right. Turn off your phones. We'll call everybody up for questions, and no recording, and no photo flash, because some people kind of old, so they might get blind and stuff. But let's get started with the video.
Battling myself, dark room, distracting myself with some cartoons till my eyes low, leaning, wonder where the time go, dreaming, battling myself, big crowd, the music is too loud, I'm hoping it tune out this feeling that I'm feeling, hey, I know this feeling ain't gon' heal, man, I'm hoping that the pain just fade away, I ain't really trying to deal with no pain today. Rather roll one up and just face it. Roll one up and just But it feel like the mirror chasing, running from all my problems, and these things still adjacent. Battle with myself, feeling stuck, but my mind be racing. Battle with myself, want it all, but I'm scared to change it. Battle with myself, 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 yeah, battle with myself, battle with myself. So please don't leave me lonely. No, I can't take it. Please don't leave me lonely. No, I can't. Please don't leave me lonely. No, I can't take it. Please don't leave me lonely.
I don't wanna smoke no more, no, cause I don't wanna cope no more. Been dealing with this pain for so long, it won't fade away. Feeling so gone, the smoke won't aid a day. 10-hour shifts, I've been dealing with these dramatic people. At a school with so many steeples, there's a whole lot of evil. They've been doing it so wrong, treating it so bad. How can I move on? See, I've been fighting with myself, so I can't get hurt by anyone else. I've been better than the truth. There's so many lies, knowing that they only just keep me blind from you. See, I'm afraid to call that name, cause I don't wanna change. I'm stuck in my ways. I'm so used to coming so close. I should've jumped harder, shit. I wish I could float, but that would make me a target. Mr. Butterfly, how you keep from dying, floating in the wind? How you grow so pretty and stay genuine? Spread up through the gin, connected to grow the flower. I'm hoping to have the power to unlock yours within.
They would never know, bro. They would never know. Cause I've always been a light in a dark cave when you couldn't find your faith. So you can't walk by sight. Get that.
Don't even talk to me until I had my meds. Mama said it might be time to settle down. Think she want grandkids. Hard to look at my father now, he got mad then. Hope the Reaper don't walk him down, I would crash my whip. Lately my days been tight, cloudy. New York niggas call me son, ain't no shine around me. The forecast keep getting more trash. Drown in these tears if I swim one more lap. And that's no cap, like national anthem. Grow my fro like cat, take a knee in my handcuffs. Laughing at my pain, no I don't do stand up. Might go Arthur Fleck, D-Train, throw a tantrum. Only child said he feeling lonely now. My only sister always lived across the town. Hoping God gon' handle it, cause I hate my job, I'm lonely. My dad is dying slowly and I'm a whore for companionship.
Okay, everybody. So that was Battle, and can we get another round of applause for that? All right, so now it's time to introduce the director of the video, June Mugo, and she's gonna spit to y'all. All right.
I'm just here to briefly explain the point of the video and the idea that was brought to us when we put the video together. As you see, there are 3 different artists, Ashley White, Jesus Shuttlesworth, and then there's Xavier in the video as well. And when they came to the idea that they wanted to do a video for this song, of course the most important part is, what is the story going to be about? What is the video going to actually cover? And of course we had multiple different ideas, multiple different stories. But there was one story that had to be told. And of course, as you could see, is the idea, the fact that Black lives do matter. Not only in the eyes of what the world sees, but also what the young people, what the young generation see, because we are in a different time. And in this song, the idea touches on this perspective that as human beings, we have one thing in common. That's the idea that we all go through battles. We are all fighting something. whether it's within ourselves, our loved ones, or whatever the case society might throw at us. We are fighting every day. And that is something they don't touch about in the history books. Because we do hear about the Battle of Gettysburg, we hear about all of these kind of wars that happen. But when it comes to our own battles, we can't just say the battle has won. We have to fight it every day. And that is what the song really touched about. And although there is one idea, one connection, there are 3 different stories being told, all of which are being vulnerably spoken by each artist. And the goal of the video was to be able to touch on each story while giving them their own time to understand what is it that they're going through and allowing the audience to also connect with them as well. So when you hear Ashley White's verse, she talks about the idea that she is not only in a battle within herself, but her own mind. And that is probably one of the biggest struggles we go through as human beings. Because that same exact mind is the same one that's going to take you out of that battle. And one thing about us human beings as well is we have our own personal space. One we can call our home, our apartment, whatever it is that is our sanctuary that is private to us. And that's why the video opens up to what is seen to be Ashley White's sanctuary, her personal space. We are entering her mind when you enter into that room in the video. And that, if you look at the room, it was messy, it was cluttered, there was a lot going on. And then not only that, there was a battle that fought. And that was between Ashley White and Jesus Shuttlesworth. Because although we do, like I said, we have battles in ourselves, we also have them amongst people who we love the most. And when you're fighting with yourself, sometimes that may be projected to those around us. And that is what we saw in the video between Jesus Shuttlesworth and Ashley White. And then we kind of go into a small segue into Zave's verse, where he comes in and he brings himself into the light very naturally. And he walks us through his story of how he is tired of fighting as well. And how it is hard for him, not only as a person, but as a black man, to have to fight every day for what he thinks is right. And that in itself is healing, acknowledging that he is going through a battle. But that doesn't solve the idea that he is going through that battle. So he kind of turns away from the camera and he walks away. And from that moment on, the camera kind of follows him. That is us as the audience also following him in his journey and what it is he is trying to tell us. And then we see Jesus Shuttlesworth kind of come back to life, and he's in the car. And you thought the last time you saw him was in the apartment. No, I fooled you. He has come back. So he's there and he picks up Zave, his friend, and now they go on a journey. But the story is kind of reversed, because you need to start from the core of the problem and kind of work your way back from that point. And that was the cause of the reverse. That was the rewound you saw in the video. And we see Zave and we see Jesus Shuttlesworth stopped by police officers, one black man and one white man, who happened to be in police uniform, because there is a difference. And in that moment, you hear Jesus Shuttlesworth talking to us, and then it goes straight into his verse, where we have now entered into his personal space, which is his car. And in that moment, he walks us through what he is going through, also acknowledging the fact that he is also going through a battle. But then at the very end, we see someone who also makes an appearance in this roundtable discussion that is going on between Zave, Jesus Shuttlesworth, and Ashley. And that is the fact that Black lives do matter. That as young people, they are also fighting for themselves. Aside from all the other battles, this is one battle they have in common. No matter how different the stories are, they always connect to this one idea. Something that's been around for centuries. And then we see that they're all taped, all their mouths, because at that point, what else is there left to say, aside from showing you what the actual problem is? Because sometimes, yes, words do speak very loud, but so do actions. And in this moment, the best way to showcase that action was to take their mouths and send a message to the audience. But at that table, it wasn't just the 3 artists who were trying to share this story. It was also the police officer, not the white one, but the black one. And when you look at a black police officer, people tend to neglect the idea that that is a black man or a black woman in a police officer uniform. And that right there could be a battle he is also facing himself. And when you hear that law enforcement has now taken another black man away from us, another black woman away from us, that black police officer has also lost a part of himself. And that right there is a battle he now has to live for the rest of his life. And that is how all the stories kind of connected to this one idea of a battle. Multiple different stories, but one thing that will always connect us is who we are as individuals. Even though our battles may be different, as human beings, we are still fighting a battle. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, June. I gotta be honest, I was just watching the video. I need to see it again now, like 2, 3, 4 more times. That was very, very enlightening. So thank you again for that, and that was brilliant. I don't know who's next on the stage. We're gonna get set up for the rest of the group, or okay, we're gonna have is it Jesus? Jesus Shuttlesworth is gonna perform for us behind that video, behind that explanation. This is gonna be great. Take it away, sir.
Police lights in my rear view when I froze. She see the fear in my eyes, tried my best to stay composed. Was driving my shorty, but was really her old fellas. Probably reported it stolen because he know that I drive it. Bumping my shit before it was even hitting like that. Had her hair bobbing and she wrapped the lyrics right back. But I relaxed when she said it would be okay. The cop let us off with a warning, said fix the light for the brakes. Mind you, that was like spring of 2017, months after Arthur Sterling was murdered for selling CDs. Then I saw Philando get killed in front of his seat. See, that one hit me different. Hearing his lady scream and his baby like, mama, please, you don't gotta cry. It'll be all right. She probably traumatized. And I still can't even fathom the thought of having to bury my parents when I'm like 65. She was like 4 in the back seat when her father died. But out to my right, I saw a ride or die. And every time I get pulled over, thank God I made it out alive. Her light brown, knew the vibes. Her light brown, get hashtag fast as mine. No lie. Bet I would've done. Jesus. All right, everybody, I'm Jesus Shuttlesworth. And that was a little record I wrote called Break Lights. And I feel like it pretty much speaks for itself, but the only thing that I want to leave you guys with is to stay solid and stay dangerous. Thank you.
We're going to roll right into our final segment here. But before we do that, I got to thank our sponsors. Once again, thank you to Journey to Your Promised Land for being our nonprofit fiscal agent for today's event. Proceeds from this event will benefit programs to empower young people. We also would like to thank our community sponsor, the Murray Church Terrell Foundation, whose mission is to provide educational resources and scholarships to youth in the Washington, D.C. area. Again, thank you again to our sponsors, for without them, we would not be able to execute this program here today. And one last time to reiterate the rules that you guys are following so great today. Being respectful, no heckling, the phones are still off, just one reminder. Again, when we have the panel discussion here, you have the opportunity to come to the mic and ask questions. I will get things kicked off with questions. But again, most importantly, no recording and no flash video. So we got to hear from all of the people on the stage here, Ashley, Jerry, Jesus, June, and we have a couple of esteemed guests on our panel. This panel is representative of a multi-generational representation of people of color. Just to give you some background on the gentlemen that have been added to our stage, Mr. Leon S. Dixon Jr., acknowledge yourself there. Mr. Dixon has served in a variety of careers over the years. He is a former infantryman in the U.S. Army. Leon has held many leadership roles over the years as well. However, the work he is most proud of is the work he has done in the ministry and with the community. His work in the community was given recognition by President Barack Obama multiple times. Leon is the father of 2 adult daughters, Noelle, 24, and Taylor, 19. We also have on the stage with us our esteemed guest, Mr. Detrick DeBurr. Detrick? Detrick DeBurr serves as founder of Game Time Giving, Inc. He is the former founder, CEO of Digital Rhythms, Inc., a technology services provider in Dallas, Texas. Detrick has served in a variety of software development roles over his career. He holds a certificate in startup fundraising. He holds a design certificate in gamification, a word I just learned. It's pretty cool. He mentors with the Tony, I'm going to mess this up, I'm going to do my best, Elumelu Foundation. Did I get that right? Elumelu Foundation. He says it better than I do. The foundation supports African startup founders. He graduated from Darden University Minority Equity Boot Camp. The boot camp educates minority business owners to access private equity capital markets, similar to what Andre Rogers was talking about. Mr. DeBurr received Stanford University's Digital Vision Fellowship for his work with Digital Literacy Alliance in Ghana, West Africa, also an international traveler. Mr. DeBurr is the author of Building Gamified Websites, Packy Publishing in 2013, and Deal Us In, How Black America Can Play and Win in a Digital Economy, published in 2001 by Anji Publishing. He serves as a planning and zoning commissioner in Colony, Texas. He graduated from Queen Afua Man Heal Thyself Wellness Warriors Program. That sounds powerful. He is a male empowerment coach with Progressive Love Academy and is an active member of the Omega Psi-Phi fraternity. We've all heard of them, right? You have some sort of a thing that goes with that. Yeah. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies, for participating in this panel discussion. I'm going to start it off with a question I'd like to ask you generally, and just ask everybody kind of the same question here. The first question: what does racial equality really look like? And is racial equality important when you think of your future? And if so, why? We want to get the younger perspective as well as the older perspective. Who wants to start? I want to go for Detrick.
Just for the sake of discussion, I'll go ahead and kick it off. But before we even do that, what I want to do is I want to thank the young people. I am a grandfather, so I have a perspective, with 3 grown children and what have you, and we have a responsibility. For those of you who might know anything about running track, okay, the relay races are won in the exchange zones. That's where the handoff is made. So you may have the fastest 4 people, right? But if you fumble the handoff, that is where you lose the race. We have a responsibility. And oh, by the way, the person with the baton, it's his and her responsibility to get the baton to the next run. It's his or her responsibility. That's your job, to make the call and put the baton properly in that person's hand, in full stride. That's extremely important. Okay, now, the apology. I don't believe, Alton, that we have properly put the baton in these young people's hands. You find them fumbling with the baton. that was your responsibility to put in their hands. So we owe you an apology. Now that we have offered the apology, okay, I've offered the apology, I'm now going to hold you accountable for running the race that I know you can run. I apologize. Now I want to say this and then we'll go over it. This is beautiful, you know, young people, hip hop or whatever, but this is not new. It was Martin Luther King. He wasn't an old dude who was spearheading this movement. He was, what, 24, 25, right? Young people have always been the catalyst of the movement. It's people like me that got in your way, okay? So that's really, you know, so it's perfectly fine that I don't necessarily understand the rap and the rhyme or whatever, because 20 some odd years ago, I was self-destruction. You headed for self-destruction, right? Right? And KRS-One and those type of people and Public Enemy, right? Were right and exact, right? And my mom and dad looked at me like, my dad used to say, why don't you turn that dope, he called it dope music. Turn that dope music off, right? But I'm like, Dad, wait a minute. Y'all just called it soul. And I think there's a documentary going on right now about Aretha Franklin. She just called it gospel. And Thelonious Monk and what have you, they called it jazz. But it's the same song. It was all about finding themselves and making sure that Black lives matter. It was just how they communicated in 18, 19, whatever you. So anyway, I know I've rambled, but I just wanted to say, that we owe you guys an apology, but we also want to hold you guys accountable.
So let one more old time to get on here around. My brother said something very important though. We dropped the ball passing this off to you. We dropped that baton. And it's easy for us to say that in retrospect because, struggle goes, life goes. As we live life, we think we're doing what's right. But a lot of times we got caught up. Our parents passed on this struggle mentality to us. And what we find is this intergenerational trauma comes with this struggle mentality. So we think our way out of trauma, our way out of struggle is through money. We're going to buy our way out. So we move, I'm from Detroit, so we move out to Oakland County to where, across 8 Mile Road where the houses are big and the schools don't have metal detectors. And we think we're teaching y'all a life lesson by doing this. And yeah, we're doing what we think is right in the moment, but we still pass on this intergenerational trauma because we think the money's going to take the place of the love that we give to our own offspring. And that's where I see, in my experience, the baton has been dropped. We try to pay off this debt, but the debt ain't one that can be paid off with money. I was blessed. My mother and father been married for 60 years. Only one in the neighborhood. And wouldn't you know, that's a fighting point too. So we moved to Detroit from New Orleans. 2 strikes against me already in Detroit. I'm a southerner in the north. I got married parents. And guess what? Colorism works the wrong way in my neighborhood because the light-skinned brother is the target. But see, my parents put something in me that we haven't done a good job passing on, and that's this self-fortitude. We give y'all this word called grit, which don't mean nothing to me. I work at a university now, and I try to pass this on to my students. Grit is a white supremacist term in the beginning, because all it means is I'm learning how to deal with the mess that's been put upon me. If I wouldn't have had this mess, I wouldn't have had no grit to have to worry about. But the other thing my parents gave me was this belief in something bigger than myself. I choose to believe in God. Didn't always believe in God, well, not God in the Christian sense. When I went to Hampton, because I'm at Hampton University, the real HU grad, I was a 5%. And that wasn't, that's a black guy. Years go by, I actually made a hydrant like many. I come back, but I realized one thing. God is where you find it, but God is finding yourself too. The one thing I want to pass on, so I can end up this round, but we can move on. There's a lot of different ways we can go about finding this healing, but the healing comes with a self-acknowledgement that I am broken. You know, it's hard, especially as a black man, to say I got a problem. You know, we can talk about toxic white male masculinity all we want, but we can also talk about this misguided sense of self. I don't want to look bad in front of my sisters here because I don't want her to think I'm a weak man. Can't have my brother thinking I'm weak because he might get over on me. Definitely can't have the white folks thinking I'm weak because they will get over on me. And I carry around all this extra stuff with me. And I never can admit I'm hurt. So the first thing is, you got to admit to yourself, you know, you can't hide from yourself too long because you got to be there all the time with you. And I know it sounds corny and country, but it's the fact. You live with you. You live in you. And if you can't deal with your own stuff, what you think you're doing to the people around you? What happens when them babies come along? Because they don't come along at one point in time. And daddy and mama can't even handle their own business because they got baggage they drag. So the first thing is the self-acknowledgement. The second thing is to be able to find somebody. We talk about mentorship and all these other relationships, but I'm going to go something deeper. Find somebody who can accompany you on your journey and help you with your bags. Walk with me. Hear me out. Because once I walk with you, then I can start trusting you enough to let you mentor me, let you coach me, let you facilitate a change in my life. Everybody ain't meant to be a transformational leader. Some people are meant to be in there just to push you along with a little charisma every night. Dang, Jill, you looking good today. Sometimes I just need that. Oh, damn, my brother, your verse was hot. We need that from time to time, but I also need to be able to say, oh, bro, you know what? You lazy. Pick up the pace. We need these honest conversations to keep us moving. So don't be afraid when the road gets hard. The person you walking with is telling you, I got you, but those buts aren't always bad. We need honesty, we need self-reflection, of course, but we need an honest voice to tell us how to move forward from time to time.
Thank you for that. I want to direct us to Ashley, based on what we just heard from Mr. Dixon. What's your female perspective on where the men of color are going? And what do we need from the female perspective to keep us going and get us going in the right direction?
I'm not sure it's about gender. I think that as human beings, there has to be a point where we are black and white when we speak to each other. And what I mean by that is we eliminate the beat around the bush, the like, oh, I'm trying to go easy on you when I say this idea. There has to be a place where you can be held accountable for your part of a certain thing. I think as far as just people in general, or just young people in general, there's this barrier where people feel like talking or crying or having a negative emotion is weak. The video we just watched, Battle, really kind of ties that together for me. I wrote it at a time when I was healing. I was trying to find new ways to communicate and to figure myself out. And it really put me at a point where I had to be clear about where I was, what I wanted, and what I needed. And I think me passing it on to my brother Zay and my brother Jesus helped them to do the same thing. I don't necessarily think it's a like there's a force that comes with it. It's you taking care of yourself and then allowing people in your space to reflect the same thing. I think that's the best way to go about it.
All right, thank you. Jerry, what do you think racial equity looks like, and how do you think we go about achieving it from a young person's perspective? And then Detrick, I'll follow up with your response.
That's an interesting question, you know what I'm saying, to think about, because, you know, growing up where I grew up, being the color I am, being from Baltimore City, being a black man, growing up in the lower and working class, you know, poor and stuff like that, a lot of that stuff is like normal, you know? So it's hard to start trying to imagine what is out without it, you know what I'm saying? But what I have learned is that it's all about me, you know what I'm saying? I'm not a victim. I never wanted to idolize and identify with myself being a victim in this world, you know what I'm saying? Because like Brother Dixon said, you know what I'm saying, it's your mindset and how you believe, how you maneuver through this world, you know what I'm saying? Granted, there are a lot of areas that we could definitely shift the power structure and the systems that we placed in, because a lot of times, you know, when you take some time to reflect and see what's going on in the world, you see that usually the darker people in the system that exists around the whole entire planet usually get the shorter end of the stick, and it's not just in America, you know what I'm saying? Now, we all have our own struggles and our own battles, you know what I'm saying? See how I do that in there? We have our own struggles and our own, you know, battles and things we're facing, black, white, whatever, you know what I'm saying? But most importantly is know yourself, know what you need in this life to be happy, you know what I'm saying? If more people are happy with themselves and happy in the life that they live, you know what I'm saying, then it wouldn't be a lot of stuff wouldn't really be happening, you know? But racial equality definitely looks like caring for other people, most definitely. That's what it starts with. It mostly love also.
Beautiful.
Pass it on to my.
That's it.
Yeah, to speak to your question about racial inequality, is two things come to mind. First of all, there is no problem that black people in America have that cannot be solved by eradicating racism. Period. There is not one black problem in America that you cannot solve by solving that problem. That thing created this thing. See, black people just didn't decide to move into a neighborhood. That's called policy. It means that the fact that just because your daddy had a GI Bill didn't mean you could go to that college. I don't care what his grades look like. That's policy. That's not brilliance. That's policy. So, to talk about racial inequality, right? I just want to give you some context, right? You can solve it overnight when you fix that, right? Everything else is window dressing. Playing with ourselves. Fake. But you know, we take our time with this. We get this fixed in a week or another century. And let me tell you why. I think it is asinine, silly, weird to discuss racial equality without just dropping the racial. You see, you can't tell me about being equal with a black man and you treat your wife tragically. You don't understand equality. You out of balance already. So don't ask me to march with you anywhere until you show me gender equality. Don't talk to me about shooting the police until I see where you are treating your gay cousin correctly, properly. So let's just talk about equality. And then we just work, it'll work itself out. So, to answer the question, I just want to give you some context. Racial inequality, to me, looks like me having the right to make myself whole and human with what I was born with. Hold on. And you being able to make yourself whole with what you were born with. Now that's not sameness. Okay, that's not sameness, because we're not the same, right? But when I can wake up in the morning and not be afraid, where my paycheck gonna come from, or when I can get in the car and not be afraid when the police get behind me, right? And you can, and you can, and you can, then that's when the equality will work itself out. But if you don't address the policies, right? If you don't address the fear, quite honestly, that undergirds it, and we could be here for the next 3 days talking about that, then we're really just window dressing. But we got to start somewhere, so I'm with that. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Let's pass it over to Jesus. Jesus, what do you think you need in order to, what do you think your future is as a black man in America? And what do you think you need in order to achieve your version of success?
To achieve my version of success, I really believe that just starts with me and knowing who I am and just staying true to the things that I want to represent and the things that mean something to me. And I think that's a big thing moving forward for not just me, but that's really with especially black people, but really with anybody, just having that knowledge of self and that awareness and just being true to the things that are true to you. I feel like you can do anything, and just forever we've been taught to do the things that seem more practical. And while a practical thing might bring you a lot of money and a lot of, maybe this access to material things, a lot of people have a lot of money and are jumping off of buildings and, killing themselves because they're still empty, having all these things. So just making sure that I keep my true self intact and make sure that I'm, like I said, being true to the things that are true to me. I feel like I'll be as successful as I want to be.
Thank you. In June, what do you see as your future? And what do you think the future of men of color looks like from your perspective?
Full disclosure, I have no right to speak on the experience of a black man. So, I just want to say that right there speaks volume in itself, considering the fact that I am a black woman, the fact that I have no right to speak on the black man's experience goes to show what the black man's experience is. So, yes, context. I learned from the best. So I think as a black woman, when it comes to success for me, I have to come to terms with I am not what my environment perceives me to be or what my environment has been, I guess, described for me for. Also considering the fact as a, really quick, as a director or as an up and coming director, I guess you could say, I always get the $1 million question. You did this video? And it's not the question, it's the way it's delivered. It's that you did this video? And it's like, you directed that? I literally, if I got $1 for every time, your girl could do this for free.
Well, maybe that's because you're so young. Could that be it?
Sweet love.
No.
I don't think that's what it has. I don't think that's what it is. I really do think that has to do with me not only being a woman, but also being black as well. Because I'm not supposed to be where I am today. I am not supposed to be on this stage. I don't think any of us actually are supposed to be. Even you are not supposed to be here. So, but I think we have created ourselves to be in the positions we are. And I'm not saying that we have the key to where we go. It is hard to get out of this struggle. It is hard to get out of almost like where you were put. And when you get that baton passed to you, to kind of go back to that initial conversation, I've ran track. I've had the situation where the baton has fallen in front of me, and it wasn't my fault, it was theirs. And one thing that was clear was I knew I had to pick it up and sprint, and I was always the anchor. I don't know why. But in that moment, it was, I knew no matter what the situation was, whether or not you passed the baton to me, whether you dropped it, I knew I had to pick it up and I had to sprint and I had to run. Because at this point, not only is the race on me, but it's for me and my team, you know? And at the end of the race, she was able to acknowledge that she was the one who dropped the baton. So now, not only did we have that conversation, not only did we communicate, that. People say communication is key. Comprehension is key. I could speak to you in Japanese, that's communicating, but if you don't understand what I'm telling you, we're not talking, you're not comprehending. So in that moment, she knew and I understood that she was at fault, but she also acknowledged that you picked up the baton and you ran and you did what you had to do. So that's what I'm doing. I picked up the baton, my parents thought they dropped or they didn't pass on to me. And parents will always feel that way, that they never pass the baton on correctly. You don't get a manual on how to pass the baton on correctly. You don't. I'm not a parent, but I hope, full disclosure, I hope I can speak on that. But for me, at least to speak for myself, I know the speed I can run, and I'm going to allow myself to run as fast as I can, not allowing people around me to tell me how fast I can go, and to not just, I guess, degrade where I'm allowed to be, not only as a black person, but as a black woman. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, most definitely. Thank you very much for playing. So Mrs. Dixon, what we see here, and the folks that are here, all educated folks, we can just, the intelligence is just oozing out of everyone. My question to you, how do we get the less educated, those of us that are starting at a lower economic scale, that have less access to education, how do we get them this message and get them to uprise and lift us all up? That to me is the hard part, because education is always the key, but how do we actually educate those that aren't in a position to be educated?
So it starts with education itself, the word education. We confuse that with higher ed, go and get a certificate, a diploma, a degree. It starts with us. It's an old saying, and we all know it, each one teach one. It's as simple as that. You know, I'm a community organizer at heart. If I'm not proximate, my man Brian Stevenson, I'm sure if y'all heard of him, he's over the Equal Justice Initiative. He speaks profusely about this term proximity. If I'm not right there with you, if I'm not proximate with you, I'm not showing you no love. I'm not in the struggle for real with you. So it starts with me being there with you. That accompaniment piece I talked about, I know it's a church term, but it's true. If I'm not walking with you, I'm just talking at you. So I have to be with you. I have to model this for you. When I was growing up, so full disclosure, when we moved from New Orleans, I wasn't rich. My family wasn't rich. My daddy got hired as a fire chief in Grosse Ile, Michigan, and when they found out he was black, they hired him sight unseen because he had done fire chief work in the Air Force. When he got to Michigan, they saw he was black, they said he was too tall to be a fireman. Too tall to be a fireman. Luckily, my mom had a good HBCU education from Xavier, so she was able to fall in and start teaching. But back then, guess how much teachers made a year? $5,000. So we lived in the projects. But guess what the beauty of being in the project was? We had black folks who actually talked about being there and helping us out. So on Monday night, Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority came and they tutored math. On Tuesday night, Delta Sigma Theta sorority came and they taught us how to cook without burning up the projects. On Wednesday night, Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity came in and they kind of did a smorgasbord, whatever you need. On Thursday night, Kappa Alpha Psi would come in and they taught us how to dance ballroom style and how to socialize. And Friday night was the fun night because Omega Psi Phi would come in and they would barbecue every Friday, I swear to you. Every Friday they would barbecue in the projects, the Jeffries housing projects in Detroit. And every little boy who didn't know how to tie a tie, whose dad was in jail for selling whatever, we learned how to tie ties, we learned how to shake hands, we learned how to look other men in the eye. And then on Saturday was another group called the New African People's Organization, which I ended up running one day. They came down, taught us the 10-point plan from the Black Panther Party, taught us how to do karate, taught us how to shoot a gun, but they also taught us how to plant a garden, how to fish, how to make electricity out of a little solar cell, how to be self-sufficient. So how did it start? Education, yeah, but don't just educate me on Voltaire. Because if I don't have any connection on how that fits in my life, it don't matter. Educate me on what I need for survival. Educate me on what I need for life. You know, there's a group of African-American philosophers who lived in a collective called Earth, Wind, and Fire. And they said it best. It's all about love. And we ain't talking about this, oh, I love you, I want to marry you, love. What Martin Luther King said, I'm talking about something that's not affection. I'm talking about something that's much deeper. I got to actually love my brothers and sisters in order to take care of them. In order for us to be proximate, I got to have a level of love. That don't mean everything's fine, you can do no wrong. Part of that love is calling me out on my stuff. Part of that love is holding me accountable, which we've all been talking about all night. It's all about that love. And we go back, my brother started off, I got to go there with it though. There's one person who set an example, and I'm not trying to proselytize, so bear with me, I apologize in advance. But when we talk about radicalism, we talk about revolutionary being, there was a revolutionary, a black Jesus. You know, I grew up in a church, in a Catholic church, where Jesus was black. He was painted on the wall. When I lived in Africa, I studied with Dr. Ben, and guess what? I saw black Jesus and black depictions of black saints. Why is that important? Because every piece of education we get is just that, education. We go to church on Sundays. Black folks are probably one of the most conservative people on earth. If truth be told, we go to church, we have old-fashioned values. However, we understand that marginalized people have certain needs too. So just like you said, what am I doing for my gay black male cousin or my transgender sister or anybody else, my AIDS-affected brother-in-law, any marginalized person? What am I doing? Because that's part of who we are too. It's all about love and getting past these nomenclatures of nothingness. I've got, and I'm ashamed to say this sometimes, I got 5 doggone master's degree and a PhD in, for what? A couple $100,000 worth of debt. And most of the stuff I knew, I know, I learned from my daddy making me read books every summer. 5 most important books he ever gave me, I read every summer. One of them was The Invisible Man. I can't go without reading that book at least twice a year. But a lot of things that we do in life, we gravitate towards those nomenclatures and get away from the real. What's real is when me and Zabe used to sit in my office and talk. That's real. When me and my daughters are out and they see how a man is supposed to treat them, their mother, and other women around them, my example speaks more than what I can tell. No, I ain't perfect. And even that, owning your brokenness, that's important. So where do we start? Those kind of education levels. Then once you get me fixed here, you can take me to the next level, and I'll be willing to go.
Awesome, thank you very much. Just to follow up on that, you spoke of the different fraternities that came into the neighborhood and taught you various things, not just reading books, educating on things that matter. Does that continue today? Do we just not see that? Is there just not enough of it? This is the first I've heard of it. I'm sure it exists and it still exists, but at what level?
It's not existing the way it should. So, and I'm not casting aspersions. I can only talk about my experience. And part of my life has been as an evangelist. So I travel and I preach and I talk and I come in contact with folks. A lot of us run for the hills once we get our level of accomplishments. And we might do a soup kitchen on Christmas or Thanksgiving or Easter. We might go, you know, do the little bunny hop and drop some eggs off in the hood. But Monday through Friday in the middle of August, we posting pictures in Punta Cana and people still struggling back on the block. And that's real. And that's not saying people ain't entitled to do more. Of course, when you work hard, you're entitled to do something with it. But there's also has to be something. We keep talking about accountability. What's my accountability to my community? What's my accountability to my brothers and sisters? Yeah, it sounds old-fashioned and it sounds like some communal stuff, but let's just look at the antithesis, capitalism. Capitalism has caused more division than it has created inclusion. You can argue that capitalism might be the real root cause of all the isms, but we're not going to dissect that today because that's a whole other conversation. But we lived in this shadow of what you were supposed to do. So black men were supposed to buy a big car, buy a big house. Depending on where you lived, and let's just be honest, you're supposed to get a white woman. Or, even worse, get 2 or 3 women on the side. I mean, I'm not saying that it's wrong because we all know this is true. We've lived in these communities where this is the unwritten rule. So, yeah, it's not happening the way it should, and there's not a level of accountability anymore for those who have allegedly made it out. Because as long as we keep these mental chains on, we ain't made it nowhere. All we did was just get a longer chain to run with. And my brother said it earlier, and there's another gentleman spoke on it, that international experience. Living abroad, what it taught me was, you can't be afraid to take what's yours. A lot of folks give me this pacifist view of the world, but everywhere, and again, I've been in the world in other ways, so I'm an airborne ranger, so I'm usually at the other end of the rifle front. But what I see are people who are not afraid to take what they believe is their right, their inheritance. But we give ours up, you know. Oh, there's a new, we got lemonade now, y'all. Let's hashtag this revolution. Oh, wait a minute. Was that the new one? Oh, what? The Waka Flock and this girl break up? I mean, we get all trivialized on other stuff, and we forget what our objective is.
Thank you. I do want to encourage the audience, if you have any questions or comments, now's the time. We have a wonderful panel here with different perspectives. Come on, step up to the mic and make sure you have your mask, and you know, let your voice be heard. That's why we're here today. I think we have someone approaching the mic now. No, I was mistaken. That was a fake out. That was pump fake. So Jerry, I'm gonna pose this question to you. You know, as a young person, what do you see as your primary struggles, the things that are getting in your way, and how can those things be addressed in our community?
I believe I'm gonna go back to what I said earlier, and I believe that it begins with self. And I'm just thinking about everything that's been saying. I've been, you know, internalizing, I'm processing everything I've been saying. I'm thinking, you know, I currently live in the projects. You know what I'm saying? So I see a lot of areas that, you know, my personal community could improve in as far as like helping each other out and doing what we could do. But on the same note, it's easy for me to see all these things because these are things that I'm not even doing for myself, for my community. You know what I'm saying? A lot of times I realize, like, you know, there's a lot of ideas in this capitalistic world we live in. You know what I'm saying? Nobody was asked to live here, you know what I'm saying? But you gotta play the game, or the game gonna play you. You know what I'm saying? You gonna get played if you think you're not gonna play this game that we living in. And I could say as many big words or whatever, but to put it simple, you know, I gotta get some money for myself and my people. You know what I'm saying? My mother and my family. You know, there's a lot of situations that's going on that are obstacles in front of us. You know, that we might not even have to worry about. We might be in have a higher perspective on it because my mind can focus on other things. Because now I'm not thinking about what's the rent, what we gonna eat tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? Who making dinner? You know, stuff like that. My personal challenges, you know, to wrap it all up though, is just one, understanding and sorting the ideas of what I believe I can accomplish for myself and what is possible for me. You know, I got dealt my own set of cards, you got dealt your own set of cards, we all got dealt our own set of cards in this life. It's most important how we play these cards. Granted, you know, we playing against people who know what's in our hand a lot of times, but it's like, you know, still I gotta make sure I put down this, I'm about to drop a banger, you know what I'm saying? I gotta do something, I gotta do it. At the end of the day, it's not gonna happen until I do it. And ain't nothing gonna change until I make a change within myself. You know what I'm saying? First and foremost, my life will never change if I can't change. You know, I can't understand and accept the reality that is my life and look at my life and what it is, look at what I can change, what I can control, and what I can't control. You know, and that's the biggest thing. And I feel like if everybody did that and look to help when we can and give how we can, more will come into our life.
Yeah. So, thank you. So I hear the aspect of capitalism and being in the projects and having to have, you know, finances in order to survive. But if someone were to drop $1 million into your neighborhood, what would that do? Would that actually do anything? What are your thoughts, Jim?
So that kind of goes back to what Dr. Dixon was saying earlier, is education. And I grew up in Jersey City, New Jersey, and not one of the best neighborhoods, honestly. And I'm not talking bad on my city, because I do work, I'm very proud of where I've been born and raised, you know what I'm saying? But I know if I dropped $1 million in my neighborhood, I know it wouldn't go the right direction. That's because if you give anybody $1 million who has never seen $1 million, they won't know what to do with it. That goes for everything. If you give somebody something they've never touched before, they've always wanted it, they are never going to know what to do first with it. So I think before this $1 million drop, so let's say $1 million is dropping, if I had the power to pause it and teach people what to possibly do with the money, then let the money drop. But until people understand what you can do with the money and how it can benefit everybody, that you can't really do much. Because honestly, unless there's a lot of value in education, there's a lot of value in teaching people what to, like, how to live life peacefully. Not to tell people what to do, but how can I live with you? How can I stand with you? And in my neighborhood, it's a lot of drugs, a lot of gun violence, and it really goes back to what was said earlier, is you can talk a lot about equality, but until you love your brother, your sister, there's no such thing. And that is a problem, and that is a huge problem I personally have seen growing up. And it's very normal to hear your homie you were in the 3rd grade with was shot and killed. It's very normal to hear so-and-so got locked up. It's very normal. You know, when I hear that, it's like, it's another day that ends with why, you know? So for me, at least that was my experience. So I know if I wanted to, and I've always dreamed about that, just being able to go back and just shift things quietly. Never want people to know what I'm moving quiet, you know what I'm saying? So I would want to, I know money is the way to fix the issues that are there, but I think education is first. And fixing up the projects, fixing up the housing, providing more jobs. Don't put money first. Allow there to be opportunity and jobs and purpose for people to have and to be able to do to stay off of the streets. Educate them on, why drugs are not the way, you're not supposed to do that kind of stuff, and how can you be a good mother to your child? Mental health. How can we bring, knowledge on how to sustain your mind correctly and how to be healthy also? That's what I'll do with the money.
Thank you.
Where there is trauma, there will be drama. Where there is trauma, there will be drama. They go together. Until you build the people, if you build buildings for those people will tear them down. You don't have to tear them down. They will figure out. They'll say, oh, these nice buildings. Man, I don't deserve this. You start tearing stuff up. However, going to the billionaires, you can take all of their money, give them about a week and a half. Guess what they're going to have? $1 million. It's almost like the thermostat. Like if your temperature is set to 75 degrees, right? If it gets too hot, the air will just kick in. If it gets too cold, the heat will just kick on, right? So what we're talking about is not dropping $1 million on people. What we're talking about is dropping millionaire mentalities on people. And they will find the million. Hold on, wait. There's $1 million in projects now. Let me count up the tennis shoes. We call them tennis shoes, I'm from the South. Let me count up the sneakers. Let me count up the televisions. Let me count up. There's $1 million in the cars. There's $1 million there today. And you know what? I've never been in this is high school. Point me to a hood, I can count $1 million. I'm positive I can, right? So that's really not what we're talking about. We don't, you know, you wouldn't, I mean, you would be irresponsible to go to your 7-year-old son and say, son, I love you. Here's $500,000. Knock yourself out. That's irresponsible. Does he go buy candy and 27 bicycles? And no, they don't buy bikes anymore. Xboxes or what? I'm sorry. I'm so out of the loop. PlayStations, right? Okay. So what are we talking about? Basically, what we're talking about is that until we address the trauma, until there's a safe place to heal, right? Until there's a safe place to heal. Because think about it like this, right? If money was the issue, and I'm just thinking about Ghana. I was in Egypt a little bit ago, and they didn't have no money. They don't have a huge divorce rate. No murder. Broke people, according to our terminology. So clearly, money is not the issue. Right? Clearly, that's not the issue. So what we're talking about here is basically replacing mentality, which takes this full circle back to there are processes and policies and procedures in place to ensure that these people think that they're less than. My sister earlier made reference to history books. I call them mystery books. Because if they don't have the truth in them, they are worthless. So, I'll wrap it up with this one, and just to not hog the mic. But I want to say I'd be remiss as a male empowerment coach. I would be remiss to say we cannot talk about the future of black men or men of color without talking about women. That is asinine. Silly. I'm sorry. Unintelligent. A fool. If you think that you're going to be able to move forward and progress in your maleness, if you don't address your own, I'll go one step further, your own inner femininity. We won't even go to your sister or your mother. I'm talking about how you're managing yourself. Your own out of orderness, so to speak. So, the next time we talk about the future of men, right, let's be sure that we're talking about the future, which implies the future of women, because you can't get there without the other. Every championship team, right? I played football. And I used to wonder why cheerleaders had to come. They ain't practice. Why they get a trophy? Why they get a ring? But I can tell you, you out there, you're sweating, you're doing your thing, whatever, you hear your name, rah, cheer. And I was like, you know what? That's all right.
That's why.
That's all right.
That's why.
So I'm gonna make this block. Not because of me no more, I'm tired. But there's people over there who came on the bus after me and got a ride back. And the ball is in my hand. So what I'm gonna do is my best to ensure that their ride is comfortable. That's what men do. So let's not have this discussion about men ever again without talking about women too. That's like talking about your left hand ignoring your right hand. A fool.
Nice. We have an audience question or comment.
Alright. So I just kind of wanted to get further insight on your point. So you kind of mentioned, you've been talking about basically the causality of the illness that's been afflicting us as black people, but what's the cure? What's the medicine for that? Because of course we can talk about how there's a lot of sneakers in the hood, there's a lot of cars, TVs, all that stuff, but how are we educating our brothers and preparing them to make fiscally responsible decisions? How are we, how are we preparing them to make smarter choices? Because so for example, I coach kids in the I teach them how to fight. I'm not gonna throw them into a situation without preparing them for that situation that I'm throwing them into. So in that same breath, if I want my brothers to be more financially responsible, if I want them to understand how to fish, if I want them to understand how to, be in the wilderness and grow campfire, how do I prepare them for this? Because in the 80s, 90s, all that stuff, the Black Panthers, we even had Crips and Bloods going in the neighborhoods, educating youth, giving them access to stuff that we probably wouldn't even get on a regular basis. So how do we help our brothers in these neighborhoods rather than criticizing them for these choices that they're making with the money that they have?
Well, I'll start, I'll pass it over. So again, it goes back to what I was, in my mind, what I've been saying all along. I got to be there with you. It starts with that example from day one. I equated my life, I made a conscious choice to be a dad. And not just a sperm donor, I wanted to be there. I changed things in my life. Nobody told me I had to, but I had a little girl that was looking up to me every day. And I wanted to be a better, I didn't want to be like the other dads that was in and out of her life. So it starts with a conscious choice on our part. But the other thing is, I've got 2 biological daughters, but I've raised 5 girls. Trauma hits, and I'm not going to get the trauma Olympics, but things happen. Somebody got to be the one to step in. For those who are spiritual people, talk about standing in the gap. But even on a more practical sense, from a communal standpoint, they didn't ask to be here. When things fall short, somebody has to step up. So it starts with, like my brother was saying, a mindset change. We have to get past this selfish stuff we got going on. And it's not a knock on anybody, but that's where we went. Generations went on. Getting that dollar made more sense than trying to build. And then when we can go down the historical path when we know the government was rewarding us for having broken homes. So we buy into a lot of things wholesale without thinking about the long-term effects, because right now it's good, it feels good. But just because it feels good don't mean it's right. So sometimes, and I'm just going from my experience, and like I said, I prefaced this before, I do ministry full time. And I'm not preaching, but I'm telling you it's just simple things that I know from growing up. Community means a lot. We talk about community, but we don't live community. It's one thing, in Detroit, I claim 7 Mile. What would that mean? I don't mean nothing if I'm not taking care of those who on 7 Mile with me. When first thing I always said, let me hit this mega million. I'm building an art institute right on the middle of 7 Mile. I can't paint nothing but stick pictures. But we're going to have paintings in there if I got to put them there, because our folks need something more. It starts with that conscious choice to be more, to be better. And then there's another simple way, and it's just funny because I just thought about it. Every year Christmas, we do Christmas, and then what do we do for the week after? Kwanzaa. Then Guru Saba gives us principles that we can live with every single day about community, collective economics, purpose. That's how you build community. We got our own script that Brother Malona Karinga wrote for us. And we treat it like another day. Oh, I'm going to do my ceremonial libations. Pass me a gift, baby. Again, conscious choices every day. It starts with a conscious choice. I know people laugh when they hear on TV therapists tell them, oh, you got to say affirmations every day. You ain't got to necessarily say affirmations, but you got to wake up with a purpose. My purpose can't be to go get a backwood and go to the dispensary. And I'm not knocking it because I do own part of a dispensary in Michigan. But again, we're talking, no, because economics, if we're going to talk about true economics, Bitcoin ain't going to be the saving grace for folks because Bitcoin is control. We continue to invest in the stock market. We saw what happened about a month ago, when folks like us went and invested. What happened? They shut that down. But guess what? My dispensary, I can't even keep money in the bank because the government says it's illegal. I can't find enough places to put this money. So what do? We go back to the neighborhood. It's 2 new community centers that you can put your hands on and touch to see how this money is transforming the neighborhood. So don't laugh when you hear the guy say he's invested in something. It wouldn't have been legal if it wasn't some money to be made from it. But all money don't necessarily have to go back to me buying a Panamera or buying an Escalade. We make a choice to go back. All I do is reinvest, and then we invest in the neighborhoods. We got 4 scholarships for students going to school in Michigan, full ride, not $2,500. It starts with conscious choices, though.
Thank you. June, last words from everybody, and then we'll move on to Xavier's performance.
Okay.
Last thoughts.
You know I'm not gonna be long, but I feel like we're more important than we realize in kind of leading the charge with how things are going to be looking for the people who are under us moving forward, because it was very intentional for people like us, our parents, our grandparents, to be prepared by unprepared leaders, and I think that was a very intentional thing. And now with just the state that we're living in now, where mental health is there's such an emphasis on it. That's what we didn't have before. We had people who they weren't securing their masks first before securing their neighbors. They're looking out for us, and they can't even do that effectively because they didn't secure their masks first. And I feel like this is the first time where that's the main focus for our generation, is to secure your mask first, take care of yourself, make sure you're healthy, make sure you're eating the right things, you're exercising, and you're educating yourself on what's actually important, and then you'll be able to effectively lead the charge for whoever is following us, and they'll be able to make all the fixes that we need to make, just like we're kind of tweaking the things that that are alternating, like a version of what we were taught, because we talk about it all the time where of course our parents weren't wrong about everything, but we're kind of able to see where they were when they weren't able to see it for themselves. So it's really just finding that balance. But people like you, people like me, being the age that we are right now, I think we're gonna be just unfathomably more important than we can even realize right now.
Okay, thanks. June, your final thoughts?
To answer your question, I get it, it is a conscious decision, but if they don't know it's a conscious decision, how are they going to make a conscious decision? Yeah, how do you make a conscious decision if you don't know how to make a conscious decision? And I only know that from experience because I come from a 2-parent household of Kenyans. They're from Kenya, and I was born here. And so I come from a really strict household, but growing up in a really bad neighborhood. So I had a really hard time trying to find my identity, because it's like, is this what is college? Is this the traditional good girl life I want, or is the streets? The streets really do be calling your name. That's not a lie. That's a fact, actually. So I was in a space where I didn't know where to go, but then I had someone in my life to help me figure out what was the right decision to make consciously. And if you don't, would you say that was a mentor or just someone that came across in your life? My parents. Okay. They were very. What they didn't have, they knew I needed to get it, but they didn't know how I was going to get it. So it was like, we didn't have this, but we need you to go figure out how to go. We don't have a college education, but you need to go figure out how to do that. And they're very, and I hate to toot my own horn, but to go off of what Leon said earlier, he has as many degrees. I also too carry 2 degrees, and it's because they were like, you have to figure out how you're going to do it. But if you're not told how to do it, you're not going to be able to do it. So my dad, to answer your question, my dad had a really hard time understanding why were people, sagging their pants or being in the streets and not taking care of their children and doing drugs and doing the wrong things, because they didn't know how to not do those things. And that is not their fault, and I really stand really firm with that, and I always have. And that was one thing I actually had to teach my parents. They didn't choose that way. You not having a college education, did you choose that, or did you not know how to get one? Same exact thing goes for them. So it starts with having people in that area who are conscious of how to teach other people to also be conscious of what are the right things to do.
Thank you. Your final thoughts?
I think that what we lack in our community is the proper counsel. My degree is in Christian counseling, and it taught me a lot about me as a person, and about the access that we have just in our culture, about the resistance we have to counsel, the resistance we sometimes have to our elder. I think that sometimes there's this perception we build about people older than us, that they're trying to make us live their way or whatever. I think a lot of young people struggle with identity, and they struggle with just listening sometimes. I think our burden as young people sometimes is that we talk too much. And so I had to learn to listen. I think that was the biggest thing as far as growing as a young community, or just as a community as a whole, is that we have to learn how to listen to people's perspective, give them compassion and understanding, and then after that, apply what the heck they just told us. Because that's the only way we can move forward. If I'm listening to you, and then I come back to you and treat you the same disrespectful way that I did before, then nothing changes. And so I really think it all comes back down to counsel and to how we receive our counsel, how we respond to hard conversations, conversations like this one. I think that's what it's about.
Thank you, Ashley. Jerry, your final thoughts? What's the core?
I agree with everything that's really being said, you don't know what you don't know until, it's pointed out. I don't know if you ever heard of the allegory of the cave, and basically if these people chained up in the cave and there's figures behind them and there's a light and all they can see is the wall and they can see these shadow figures, and this is what they know their life to be. This is what I know. And one day one of the dudes in the cave got out the shackles and he was able to see this ain't really what's going on. There's some light behind us putting these puppets on the wall. And then he tried to come back and talk to the people it's still locked up and still seeing the wall, and they what you talking about, bro? Puppets, lights, shadow, what does that mean, bro? This is what I know, this is all I see, And some people, you can't teach nobody nothing if you don't reach them, and being in proximity and giving them the knowledge to even understand where you're coming from. You gotta reach people where they at. You can't say some really introspective, really intellect. Sometimes you gotta speak to people exactly where they at in life. You know what I'm saying? You can't really be talking to them they gonna feel like you're talking down to them sometimes too. So. Yeah, I think the biggest thing, really is just being sure that someone know that you care about them first, because if someone don't know you care about them, they're not even going to listen to what you got to say. So, yeah, that's really my thoughts and all that.
Well said. Well said. Leon, your final thoughts, and then with that.
Again, I go back, there's 2 points I'm going to make real briefly. One, it goes back to that being proximate, like my brother said, if each one is teaching one at a certain point in time, my sister's absolutely right. If I don't know no better, I can't do better. But if I'm committing my time to helping you, that time will come sooner than later. And that's our responsibility to continue on. And the other thing is, it goes out to, my sister started, but I'm gonna go piggyback off of her. My generation need to remember, young folks do this, we did this. And I think sometimes we forget along the way that just 30 years ago, this was me. I was getting ready to get put out of Hampton because I was setting the library on fire because the president wouldn't divest from South Africa. Nah, that tell you how old I am. That was 1986. You know, but I mean, the struggle is always the same. You know, and we do these things, and we're misguided, and we need somebody to accompany us on that journey. So hopefully we can use these life lessons to come back. No, we ain't trying to change how y'all. We just don't. Honestly, we really don't want y'all to make the same dumb mistakes. That's why we talk so much.
Thank you for that. Detrick, you'll have a final word, and we'll go on to Xavier's performance.
Yes, sure. I want to speak to the brother's question specifically. And I want to give a prescription. I want you to find the poem, Live Your Creed. Print it out and embody it. I won't go through the whole thing, but it says, I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. I'd rather want to walk with me than just show the way. The eye is a better pupil, much more willing than the ear. Examples may be misleading. Advice may be misleading, but examples are clear. My point is, when they see you, you don't have to say nothing. Matter of fact, the less you say, the better off you are. You can't tell them, pull your pants up, and you say it. You can't talk to them about money, and you look broke. So you go get your best suit, and you clean it every day. As far as they concerned, whoo, mister, got it going on. So be an example for somebody, for them. Because you're all they see. They're in your cave that they chose. So you have a responsibility to them. Show them an example. Go print the poem out, live your creed. That's the prescription.
Awesome. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Let's go with our panel. A round of applause. I think you guys knocked it out of the park.
All right, so how y'all doing? All right. We got some amazing talks, amazing people on the stage already. Crazy. I'm here to perform a couple songs. Yeah. My circle got some halos. And damn, I miss my cousins. I know they with the angels, but it's hard to let it go. Especially when you love them. You never let them know. Yeah, I'm still hurting. But learning that I can never fold again. Knowing if I shed another tear or shit that wasn't real, then I will never make it to the end. But I'm here now. I felt what I felt and did have. The pain by good growth, my hair out. But now it's locked in, I can't now. I do this for my counterfeit. So I just wanted to address that, man. A couple years ago, I lost family members. It's a sad thing. It still hurts to this day, but it's okay. Summer bumper. Been working on this little project for a minute, but trying to get my mental right, get on it, you know what I'm saying? So I appreciate y'all. Chilling with these people, got it feeling like a winter night. Sleeping, smoking, drinking on my feet, just feel like on the other side, say what you don't want to say. Maybe it will spark a light. Never raised.
way. Big job, a big line, no money will never stop the pain. Maybe it will skip it all, buy some beats like alcohol. World be look in the stool, comparing my hurt cause I'm more after than you. So who gon' be the bigger man? Woman forced to wear shoes. We can't do our job correct. Love her, but you been stressed. Now this one for the summer nights. Please for the breeze, cause we smoking northern lights. Jingle from the keys that open me, it feels so right. This one's for the, hey, summer nights. This one's for the, hey, summer nights. Please for the breeze, cause we smoking northern lights. Jingle from the keys that open me, it feels so right. For the, hey, summer nights. This one's for the, hey. Alright, so this summer bumper. Pretty much, man, like, it's just going through life, being young, bro, hanging around folk, man. We done a lot of different things, man, like Jerry from Baltimore City, Ash from Virginia, G from everywhere, June, Greg, I say Greg, I'm gonna say Gordy, man, so many people, bro. So many people, and I just met a lot of people too. And I really want to say thank you for the opportunity, man. Like, it's my first time moderating anything, so I'm like trying to figure out what to do. I don't really know what to do. That's so funny. I got manners, man. Oh God, I ain't gonna lie. The mess was in my mouth, but oh. My bad. But again, just thank you. Just thank you for everything, man.